Paul knew some believers who were in this state. Let's look at what his word says and what he wrote to them. 1 Corinthians 9, 24 and 25. He says this: "Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever." Paul is telling these Christians who have grown weary, he's saying, don't jump into the race not wanting to win. Run as to win. And know that the prize that we will receive will be far, far greater than any prize of any competition, and it will be worth it. Paul tells these Christians, run to win. John Maxwell has a quote that I love. It says this: "Nothing makes less sense than to be in a race that you have little desire to win." These days, I believe that many Christians have little desire to win the race, to keep running. There's a buzzword in churches that you've probably heard a lot recently, is the word apathy. Many people are talking about the apathy of the church and how its members have grown apathetic. But I'm from the deep south. I'm from Mississippi, and so I don't use that word apathy or apathetic a lot. I say it a little bit differently. I say it appears to me that there's a lot of Christians who just don't give a rip about how they finish the race. Or I say they could care less about whether or not they're running. They're content to begin a relationship with Christ, get their free ticket to heaven, and sit there and wait until that time comes. Paul says you got to give a rip whether or not you are winning the race. You've got to give a rip whether or not you finish well. And sadly, many Christians don't seem to. To run the race with endurance, we must care about winning. We must give a rip. How can we do this? How can we run the race with endurance? We can run with endurance because of our encouragement. We can run because of the encouragement that we have. Let's look back in chapter 12, verse 1, and read that verse from the beginning. It says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge cloud of witnesses to the life of faith." Let's take that phrase for a second. It begins with therefore. Many teachers have said that anytime we see the word therefore in Scripture, we need to look and see what it's there for. And so let's look at what this is there for. It says, since we are surrounded by such a huge cloud of witnesses. What is this cloud of witnesses? What is this there for? To answer that, we need to look back one chapter into chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11 is commonly known as the Faith Hall of Fame or the Hall of Faith. And I'm not going to read the entire chapter to you, but I want to paraphrase and give you a list of some of the names and accomplishments that are listed there. So listen to this as I go through pieces of Hebrews chapter 11. Faith is the confidence that what we hope for will actually happen. It gives us assurance about things we cannot see. Through their faith, the people in days of old earned a good reputation. It was by faith that Abel brought a more acceptable offering to God than Cain did. It was by faith that Enoch was taken up to heaven without dying. It was by faith that Noah built a large boat to save his family from the flood. It was by faith that Abraham obeyed God when he was called to leave his home. It was by faith that even Sarah was able to have a child, though she was barren and was too old. It was by faith that Isaac promised blessing to the future of his sons. It was by faith that Jacob, when he was old and dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons. It was by faith that Joseph, when he was about to die, said confidently that the people of Israel would leave Egypt. He even commanded them to take his bones with them when they left. It was by faith that Moses' parents hid him for 3 months. It was by faith that Moses, when he grew up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. It was by faith that the prostitute Rahab was not destroyed with the people in her city. How much more do I need to say? It would take too long to recount the stories of faith of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and all the prophets. By faith, these people overthrew kingdoms, ruled with justice, and received what God had promised them. What's it there for? That's what it's there for. It's there to remind us of a huge cloud of witnesses, of people that we can remember and look to. It's not that these people are standing in the galleries of heaven watching us and are disappointed when we fail. Can you imagine trying to live up to Moses, who led a group of people, an entire nation, out of bondage, and think that you're just trying to lead your own family? Can you imagine thinking that Noah built an ark by faith and you're just trying to build a fellowship by faith? Can you say stage fright? That would be a difficult audience to stand in front of. And though they may not be standing watching us, we ought to be looking up to them. They are witnesses to God, not of us. They are examples, not onlookers. They may not be looking down watching us so that to see if we fail, but we ought to be looking up to them for encouragement. Because you see, nothing is more encouraging than the example of someone who has done it before. Forbes magazine, just a couple of years ago, ranked the greatest individual athletic achievements of all time. Some that made the list were Lance Armstrong's 7 consecutive Tour de France victories. It's pretty impressive. Jesse Owens set 4 world records in 70 minutes while he was a college student. One of my most impressive is a 14-year-old Nadia Comaneci. She made 7 perfect 10s in the 1976 Olympics. Up to that point, there had never been a perfect 10 scored. In fact, when they put her score up on the board, they had to post it as a 1.0 because the scoreboard couldn't even hold a 10. It wasn't until after those Olympic Games that they changed the scoreboards so that they could put 10 on them. I think that's pretty impressive. I think they're all pretty impressive. But none of them was the most impressive. According to Forbes magazine, the most impressive individual athletic achievement of all time was by a man named Roger Bannister. Roger Bannister ran the world's first sub-4-minute mile. See, up to this point, every great runner in the world had been trying to run a sub-4-minute mile, and many, many had come close, some, in fact, within seconds, but there seemed to be a barrier there that no one could overcome. They would run, and they would get close, and then they would come again, they would run, and they would get close, but they couldn't break the 4-minute mark. And people began to say, it's impossible. No one's ever going to run a sub-4-minute mile. It just can't be done. That's what they said until Roger Bannister did it. When he ran a mile in 3 minutes and 59.4 seconds. When he did, not only had he trimmed 2 full seconds off the world record, but he also ran the world's first sub-4-minute mile. This feat that everyone said was impossible and took over 1,954 years plus to accomplish surely stood for an impressive amount of time. That impressive amount of time that his record stood for was 6 weeks. In only 6 short weeks, someone else, a man from Australia, ran a mile in 3 minutes and 58 seconds. See, once Roger Bannister showed everyone that it could be done, that you could run a mile in less than 4 minutes, lots of people began to do it. In fact, mile times have consistently dropped, and now the world record's down to 3 minutes and 43 seconds. There's no more encouraging thing than a successful example of someone who has done it before. And that is what we have in this cloud of witnesses that I read to you. They are standing there as the example, the successful example, that the life of faith is not only possible, but it is the best life possible. That they did it, and you too can do it. We can run with endurance the race. We can make it to the finish. We can do it without being weary. We can make it. But in order to do that, we have to be willing to lay some things aside. There was a mentor that I had in running, and his name was Jason. And what Jason did, I did. He was a senior when I was a 7th grader. He was extremely fast, and I wanted to be extremely fast. And so if Jason was eating it, I was going to eat it. If he was doing it, I was going to do it. And so at one of my very first races, I followed Jason to the starting line. I was dressed like Jason was. I had on a pair of regular length basketball kind of shorts and a T-shirt, and I had on my running shoes that I'd practiced in. And he had on something similar. But as we walked to the starting line, Jason began to take off his T-shirt. And he had on a shirt under it that looked exactly like this. Because this is my cross-country jersey from when I was in high school. See that S on it right there? Stood for Simpson Academy. Get so you can see this. It's got wings. Because we were so fast. He had on a shirt underneath his T-shirt that was like this. And not only that, he took off his T-shirt, and then he took off his shorts. And underneath his shorts, he had on some running shorts. And they were the shortest, littlest things. They had the slits all the way up the sides that never really joined. They just overlapped. And I looked at him, in all honesty, and I said, "What is that?" I didn't bring my running shorts today because they're still dirty from running last night. No. Sorry. Get back on track here. I said, "What is that?" He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Are you running in that?" He said, "Yeah." And my next question is the obvious one. I said, "Why?" He said, "I'll tell you why." He said, "You see your T-shirt? Feel it." And I did. It says made of cotton. I said, "Yeah." He said, "As you begin to run, that T-shirt is going to absorb the sweat that your body puts off. It's going to begin to weigh more. And by the time you run 3 miles, you're going to put out a lot of sweat, and it's all going to still be riding on your shoulders in that T-shirt." He said, "This jersey, it's not going to hold any sweat. It's going to wick right off. I'm not going to have any extra weight to carry." He said, "You see your shorts?" I said, "Yes, I see my shorts, and I'm glad I have them on." He said, "You see how long they are?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Every time you begin to take a stride, the leg of those shorts is going to put a little bit of resistance against your leg. And because the inseam is so long, there's going to be a limit to how big a stride you can take." He said, "See, my shorts, I'm not going to have any resistance. I'm going to be able to take the longest stride possible with no resistance because of my shorts. It's going to make me faster." And as if my mind wasn't sufficiently blown, he sat down on the ground and took off his shoes and pulled from his bag the coolest pair of shoes I've ever seen. I mean, it was almost like they weren't really shoes. I mean, by the time he put them on his feet, it was like they were just kind of painted around his foot. There was nothing to them. They were just thin material. It only had like 2 shoelaces, no tongue. It was just split right up the middle. The bottom wasn't like a rubber sole. It was just kind of like a plastic flat piece that was formed to his foot. He said, "Feel this shoe." And I put one of his shoes in my hand. And it was his tennis shoe like he had on before. I said, "Feel it?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Feel how heavy it is?" I said, "Yeah, it feels a lot like the shoes that are on my feet." "Yeah." He said, "Now feel this shoe." And he put his running flat in my hand. And it was like I was holding nothing. He said, "You feel the difference?" I said, "Yeah, I feel the difference." He said, "These shoes are the lightest shoes that money can buy." He said, "And over the course of 3 miles, while others are lugging around those heavy shoes, I'm going to have on these light shoes, and I'm not going to be carrying any extra weight. I want to be as fast as I can possibly be." And what Jason knew that day that I'm not sure that we totally grasp this day is that to run a race quickly, to be fast, we have to be willing to strip some things off, to lay some things aside. And we're often we are not.